Hello friends, welcome to our session on Spring AOP. The agenda for today's session is Introduction to Spring AOP, AOP Concepts and Terminology, Types of Advice, and Steps to create a Spring AOP application. This section will be covering Spring AOP. Now, what is Spring AOP? Spring AOP enables aspect-oriented programming in Spring applications. Aspects enable modularization of concerns like transaction management, logging, or security that cut upon multiple type of objects. AOP adds cross-cutting concern before, after, or around the actual logic. It makes easy to maintain code in the present and future. We can simply add and remove the concerns without recompiling the entire source code simply by changing the configuration files. So this is what is the Spring AOP. That is, maintenance is very easy using a Spring AOP application, because if in future any changes are to be made, then those changes can be made using the configuration files. The entire project need not be configured again. Now we'll come to why AOP. AOP, Spring AOP, it provides the pluggable way to dynamically add the additional concerns before, after, or around the actual logic. Now here we can consider a very small example, like if a particular notification or a message has to be sent after a particular number of logs. That is, a particular number of methods to be executed. So a log has to be maintained, and after the particular number of logs are executed, then a message has to be sent. Now earlier this can be made possible by aspects, as they can be provided, and they can be provided externally using configuration files, XML configuration or annotations. But then when if in future the client says they don't want a notification at that particular point, then we don't have to change the entire program. We just have to change it in the configuration, and then simply this would work. So maintenance of a program using Spring Aspect is very easy. So that's why Spring Aspect is basically used. Now AOP Concepts and Terminologies. Here, before this, I would just like to add one more point, that Spring IOC and Spring AOP, they are completely independent. They are not dependent on each other. AOP is completely independent and it's best suitable in web applications. Now when we come to the concepts and terms that are used in Spring AOP, we'll come to aspect, point cut, join point, advice, and weaving. These are some of the major concepts or terms that we are using. Now we'll come to what is each and every term. That is aspect. Aspect, it is a concern which is implemented generically. It is a modularization of concern such as transaction management that cut across multiple classes. Advice, the method implemented by a particular aspect at a particular join point is known as an advice. Now a join point is any point in your program such as method execution, exception handling, etc. And Spring supports only method execution join point. Now when we come to point cut, advice is associated with a point cut expression and runs at any join point matched by the point cut. For example, the execution of a method with a certain name. And here when we come to weaving, next is the linking the aspects with any other application types or objects to create an advised object is known as weaving, and Spring AOP performs weaving at runtime. So these are all the major concepts that we have to cover in Spring AOP. Now we'll come to the different types of advice. We have the before advice, after returning advice, after throwing advice, after finally advice, or just after advice, and then we have the around advice. Now we'll come to what is before advice. An advice that executes before a particular join point. So Advice is the method or the method that an aspect has to implement or execute. So here, when that advice is executed before a join point, then it is known as before advice. After returning advice to be executed after a join point completes normally is known as after returning advice. And after throwing advice to be executed if a method exits by throwing an exception is known as after throwing advance. And next we come to after finally advance, that is advice to be executed regardless of the means by which a join point exits is known as after finally advice. So it can be either you after returning or after throwing. That is not a problem. However, when advice is executed after that, after the join point exits, the advice is executed. And around advice that surrounds a join point such as method execution and around can perform custom behavior before and after the method invocation. Now we'll come to steps to create a Spring AOP application. Maven dependencies. The required Spring AOP dependencies have to be imported to the project. Then the aspect and point cut expressions, write an aspect class associated with @aspect annotation and write the point cut expression. Then methods, that are the join points. Methods have to be written on which the advices are to be executed and match with the point cut expressions. And such methods are known as point cuts. And run the application and watch the console. So these are the steps that we cover to create a Spring AOP application. And now if you think this session has been informative, then please like, share and subscribe. And thanks for attending our session on Spring AOP.